had 44 pairs of millstones in it. So he's making a lot of flour, he's making a lot of money, and he's also making a lot of flour dust. But back in 1874, nobody really knew how dangerous flour dust was. Unfortunately, Mr. Washburn is going to be the guy to find out on the tragic night, May 2nd, 1878, at exactly 7:10 p.m., so many people watched it happen.
Tomorrow.
Some sort of spark in the mill that night ignited the flour dust. Eyewitnesses said they watched it started on the grinding floor, and then each floor 1 second apart as the explosion moved up to the top of the mill, the roof 150 feet straight up in the air. And then one of the night watchmen at the Humboldt mill, who lived to tell about it, said he turned and saw this mill rise off the ground, and it hung twixt heaven and earth before crashing down into a crater 30 feet deep that burned for 30 days. So, at that point, Mr. Washburn comes back from Wisconsin. He sees it. It's a tragedy. He's very sad about the 14 millers that died. In fact, he'll go on to build an orphanage for their children because he realizes that their widows simply can't care for those families on their own. So at the end of South Minneapolis, he'll spend $350,000 of his own money to put up an orphanage so that the mothers can travel the streetcar line. And it's at the very end of the streetcar line they'll get off and visit their children on weekends in the orphanage. And that orphanage has since been turned into Washburn High School on that site. So it still have that memory of Washburn there. But he'll also rebuild his mill in 1880. He'll make it twice as big as the one that exploded. But of course, he's smart enough to put dust collectors in his new mill. That did solve the problem. So the museum is now in the actual walls of that 1880 mill. And that's where you were touring around today. So what we're going to do now is demonstrate the power of exploding flour. We'll also pass around a picture of the 1880 explosion, a little photoshopping there from 1878. But that picture appeared a week later in local and international papers as well. And once this explosion was heard about, millers all around the world suddenly realized that the bigger you make the mill, the bigger the explosion is going to be. So you better solve this problem of explosions. And it took about 3 to 5 years before they really understood that flour dust is 50 times more powerful than gunpowder, and that's why you need dust collectors in the mill. But let's see if we can get 1 tablespoon of flour to explode tonight. Try to keep the rest of the mill building in one piece, but let's see if we can get our little Cargill grain elevator here to blow up for us. So I've got the flour in there. You need 3 things to get a flour mill to explode. Of course, you need flour. You need oxygen, because oxygen is going to assist in the explosion. It's really a burning. That's what happens here. Particles of flour are burning, and you need some oxygen to assist in that burning. And you need a spark, some sort of a piece of equipment, perhaps an electric motor. Actually, it's a lot of metal on metal pieces that would turn, and that spark would come out just at the right temperature to start the dust exploding. So now I've got my flour, plenty of oxygen in the air in there. I've got a built-in spark, a little electrode. I control it from here. We'll just listen. I can hear it sparking in there, but right next to the flour there's no explosion. And that's because flour in a dense pile doesn't explode. And that's why you can go home tonight, light a match, drop it into that bag of flour in your pantry, and the flour is so dense it will snuff out the flame. So it's perfectly safe in your kitchen. It becomes dangerous when it becomes a dust out in the air surrounded by oxygen molecules that will fuel that explosion. So I've got to find some way to get this pile of flour in here to form dust in our elevator. And I have a little air compressor here. I'm going to pump some air into it. So I have a blast of air. Then I will get the spark going again. And with a blast of air, let's see if we can turn our pile of flour into flour dust and blow off our little roof up here. And we'll do that in 3, in 2, in 1. And there's 1 tablespoon exploding. You can imagine what it was like when this entire building exploded. People out in Stillwater, which is about 45 minutes away, they said they thought it was an earthquake. And they didn't know until the next morning when some guy rode a horse out there and said, no, it was the Washburn flour mill exploding. Chunks of this mill landed on the other side of the river, landed 4 blocks up in downtown. Chunks in excess of 150 pounds of limestone were blown that far away. Like I said, it destroyed 5 other mills. It was the wake-up call for the millers. You really do need to collect flour dust in a mill. You just can't let it float around. Lucky for you folks, we swept up the last of that flower dust just this afternoon before you got here. So feel safe in the museum tonight. It's still a good place to be. So if you have any questions, let me know. If not, head back out and enjoy the museum.
Thank you.